Welcome back to Robot Roundup. Today we'll be exploring the ocean depths in search of lost treasure and legendary creatures as we build a deep sea droid. Ready? Let's go. There's something really evocative about antique deep sea diver helmets. They're almost haunting. I scanned my favorite sketch and redrew it in a design program. I measured some of the parts I'll be using so that I could make a full-size blueprint that I'll reference throughout this build. I measure the proportions of the head and make a foil ball of the same size. Then I roll out a layer of Super Sculpey and let it do its thing. I smooth out the rough edges. I have a cookie cutter that's the perfect size for the eye. So I cut out a circle and carefully remove the clay. I add a Boba Fett inspired helmet dent. Clay is great for adding little pits and scratches that will look like worn out metal. I was going to add a pawn as a head detail, but changed my mind later. I smooth out any fingerprints with a coat of isopropyl alcohol. Then I bake it for 30 minutes. Now I'll remove all the foil by drilling it in a few places to loosen it up and then pulling it out in chunks. Then I clean it up a bit and do some light sanding. I searched all my bit boxes for an existing piece that fit the inner eye. But in the end decided to make it out of clay. I rolled a thick slab into a tube. Then I fixed it in place. And baked it all again. I need to clean it up some more and fix these earlier mistakes. I filled the seams with perfect plastic putty. Putting it on pretty thick to fill in the back panel lines that I don't want anymore. I measured and drew lines around the axes. You can see how off-center some of these details were. I drill a small hole in the back. I want an easy way to light the eye, so I'm using an existing little LED component that will fit in the back hole. I'll use some Lego pieces for the arm joints, drilling and filing out holes for them. I want to add a seam line across the middle, so I use foam tape as a guide. Then I use a scribing tool and carve multiple light passes across the line. This creates a cleaner line than I could do in the pre-baked clay. I'll use 2-part epoxy putty for the remaining elements so that I don't have to keep baking it. Always use separate tools for the A and B parts. I knead equal parts together and then make a plug to repair the top. water helps smooth it all out. Then I'll cut out a ring that will go around the back light panel. Off camera, I sculpted and baked the antenna. This looks way better than the chess piece, which looked too much like a chess piece. To start the arms, I'll measure and cut lengths of styrene tubing. I use more of my favorite little capsules for the hands and forearms. I sand the pieces for better glue and paint adhesion. The ball-shaped joint is left over from a Bondi Star Wars kit. I do a test fit of all the pieces. Then I glue the joint to the backing and lock it in place with a perler bead. The backing piece had 3 little circle indents, so I covered these with rhinestone rivets. Pony beads are the right size for the hand joints. I'll glue some smaller beads to them for added detail. I bend some steel wire into a loop that matches the size of the hand grippers. Then I'll thread the wire into the bead and cut it into a C shape. I glue a peg into the bottom that allows the hand to rotate. I coil some thinner wire and thread it over the hand grippers. I take some perler bead caps and glue them onto the ends. This hand is done. I'll cut the other hand out of PVC board. I measure the spec and redraw it on the board. I like this material because it cuts and sands nicely. I mark out all the other measurements. The straight lines are easy to cut. I'll drill and glue some wire pins that will hold it more securely to the bead. The peg fits into a smaller tube, which will let it rotate. Then I take epoxy putty and stick it all together. The big bead helps keep it all aligned. I'll add a band of putty around the bottom of the forearm and sculpt a few pits and dents. The hands are about done. They remind me of little samurai figures. Okay. I'll cut a zip tie to use as gripper texture on the hand clamps. Plastic sprue pieces will support the arms. A quick test fit about wraps it up for the arms. I'll measure a circle for the hip piece. I'm using more PVC board. I had trouble cutting a curve. It was quicker to do it this way and then sand it smooth. I'll measure the length and angle of the legs so that I can mark where the legs attach. I drill holes for screws that the leg tubes will attach to. I thread wire through another pony bead which will form the knee joint. Then I'll glue top and bottom tubes cut to size. Make sure the glue evenly coats the inside of the tube. For the upper leg, I'll measure and sculpt the basic shape and coil a thin snake of clay around the outside. After baking it, I'll wrap a thin layer of clay around it. I want it to look like rubber stretched over a flexible support. I'll bake it again and drill out the center. When designing the blueprint, I left the feet a little vague. After a few experiments, I ended up with this mock-up of the basic foot design. I'll use this as a reference when sculpting the final feet, which are made mostly by measuring and cutting clay slabs. By cutting clay away rather than adding it, the edges stay nice and crisp. I'll load some clay into my extruder and stack a few dies to make half of a hexagon. I roll out a pretty long strip. I'll save most of it for other projects. I measure and cut a length for the back of the foot. I'll also cut some thin slices for some extra detail. Now they've been cured in the oven. Using a square styrene strip, I'll make small brackets for the legs to attach to. Forgot to angle the front of the feet, so I'll mark and cut the edges. A Lego jig will hold the feet and legs in position for gluing. This keeps the hips parallel to the ground. After the glue is fully cured, I'll take apart the jig and do a quick test fit. It's pretty good. I made some little servos out of different tubes that add detail as well as some extra support to the leg attachment. I'll use a Lego brick as a template for the face grill. I made several putty loops from the brick. Then I'll mark cut lines and glue the pieces together. This is a dollar store LED candle. I'll take its battery spring to use for an arm hinge. I'll drill some small holes into the head, then thread thin wire loops around the spring to attach it. I'll add more epoxy putty around the spring to look like a gasket or a coupler. Now I'll add some greeblies. I drill a small hole and add a plastic bead that will serve as a little pressure valve. I'll drill more greebly holes. This one is a pen cap. This is a plastic sprue pipe. This is a dial from a toy. I'll add a few more rhinestone rivets. Then a few other plastic bits. And another pen cap. I found a perfect sized clear plastic cap that I then sanded. I glue it inside the eye to act as a light diffuser. I'll stretch out the arm spring in order to add its covering. I'll coat strips of tissue paper with Mod Podge and cover the spring. I'll cut the wire holding the spring and then fold the baffles between the spring wires. That's it for the build. Now for a quick brown primer. I'll use copper for the main body color. Then I'll use brass for most of the details. I did a bit of research, and copper and brass seem to be the actual materials that antique diver helmets were made of. The brown primer complements the metallic colors and helps keep that old-timey look. I'll use a dark gray for the rubbery-looking arm and leg baffles. I'll dry brush a lighter gray to give it a worn out look. I'll use metallic gray for the hands. Any kind of silver dry brushed over a rusty brown makes for a great old metal effect. Then I'll do a burnt umber oil wash over the whole thing. I swear it's not Worcestershire sauce. I'll add a bit more wash to some of the crevices and seam lines. Then I'll use off-white oil paint to add a little bit of corrosion and salt stains. I'll I'll leave on just enough for a subtle effect. Off camera, I spent about 2 hours cutting and sanding a piece of acrylic into a disc. I'll glue it in place with clear part cement. Super glue fumes would probably fog up the window. Then I'll glue on the face grill. And with that, I think he's ready for sea trials. Thanks for watching. Robots rule, and so do you. See you at the next roundup. Oh, and please don't actually put a camera in the oven.